it's Beth. Welcome. Today I am going to be playing some more with the Steamboat Willie kit, the May 2026 kit from Love from Lizi. And it is basically the vintage kind of Mickey Steamboat Willie image if you've seen it at the beginning of any like of the Disney shows. So it's super cute. The kit itself has a ton of great items, and I will link my unboxing at in the description box below, and I'll try to remember to put a card here. But then the add-ons are amazing too. So you can get 2 additional Steamboat Willie paper packs, a blue Willie and a red Willie, and then you get some additional like items that kind of coordinate really well with the kit. So today I'm going to be playing with all 3 of the paper packs, and I am going to focus on using up some of the scraps that I've created in the cards I've made so far. So in order to help me use up those scraps, I am going to be pulling in some of my sketch sets. Not going to be using the cutting guides. I'm mainly going to be focusing on some of the card sketches because I believe the sizes of some of the papers I have left will work well for these sketches. So that is my plan. So let's go ahead and get creating. The first thing I'm going to do is pull out the scraps from each of the 3 paper packs. I have a good amount of larger scraps as well as some tiny scraps. So I did go ahead and sort them just to make them easier to find. I am going to be starting with my sketch set number 18. So I'm looking to see which of these larger scraps are at least 3 inches wide, which I think they all were. And then it was just a matter of choosing 2 that went together. So I'm working on sketch 18A, and so I need 2 pieces that are 3 by 4.5, and then I'm going to stack them on top of each other and cut them at a diagonal from one corner to the other at the same time. And that just ensures that when I piece them together, they are going to fit really well. I'm going to bring in a black matting layer that is 3 1/4 by 4 3/4 to go behind these 2 triangular pieces. And in hindsight, I wish I would have done them on white and then the black card mat, but it still turned out okay. You don't need to do this step if you're just gluing them down onto the paper or the mat or the card as is, but I did want to add some of the blue metallic pinstripe peel-offs that came in the kit, so I used the washi tape to hold those 2 triangles together just so that I could more easily add that peel-off to cover the seam where the 2 triangles meet. And then we'll just fold those over to the back, save that little scrap, and then I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other card. And you could do this without the tape too, but it just makes it so much easier. And that washi tape roll is one that I don't love, so I tend to use it for things like this. So now that I have those 2 pieces ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and apply those to the black matte layer. And then we'll add those to the card bases. All of my cards today are A2, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and they're all like side folding white card bases. I had a piece of the kind of maroon cardstock left, and so I decided to use that as a card mat for one of the cards, but then the other one I'm just going to go ahead and put directly on the white card base. It does pop really well. So this kind of gives you 2 options, 2 ways to do this sketch. And I'm going to, once I get them applied to my card, I'm going to work on choosing some embellishments from the ephemera pack. I wanted something large, so I went with, I think it's Pete for that one on the right, and then the Steamboat Willie with the blue shorts for the card on the left. And then I'm using the Let's Celebrate sentiment from the Let's Celebrate stamp set, which was a recommended add-on. It is a stamp set from a previous kit, and it kind of works really well with this kit as well. I will have all of the Love from Lizi products that I'm using today linked in the description box below for you. And then we'll also have my free sketch sets linked, so they are free to download as PDF. You can then print them or save them to your device, however you prefer to use them. And then I will also link to my sketches and templates page. I do have about 20 sketches at this point. I think, well, 18. There were a few that were for some classes, like paid classes that I did. So I think there are 18 sketches out there, numbered up through 20, that are free for you to use. They are a great way to use up your stash if you are trying to do so, or they're also great for beginning card makers who may not have a lot of supplies. So they kind of are pretty versatile. Adding glue to the back of the ephemera pieces to get those down. And then on the white card, like the white backed card, I'm bringing in some of these black diamonds, and this was from the Steamboat Willie variety pack peel-offs. And then for the Steamboat Willie card here, I'm bringing in some of the Steamboat Willie sequin mix and just pulling out some of the like medium-sized dark blue ones. I just thought that would help kind of carry that blue metallic from the pinstripe, like from the seam on that rectangular focal point, kind of emphasize that a little bit more. Using my pick tool from scrapbook.com. And then on the inside of the card, I always like to add scraps. It's a way to use up scraps, and then it's just a way to add a little fun interest and color to the inside of the cards as well. So I just have this strip that I cut in half and adding fishtails to the right side of them, and just will glue those down and add them to the inside. And then this completes cards 1 and 2. For card 3, I am going down to sketch 18B. So I have another panel that was pretty close to 3 inches wide. So I just cut it down to 4.5 inches long. And then I had these strips of this plaid paper that were like the perfect width. I just needed to fix the length. So I just trimmed those down to 4 inches. And then I'm going to layer one on top of the green panel there, and then one underneath it, so it kind of gives you a little weave effect. And right now I'm trying to line them up so that I can do the strip that's going beneath the green panel, and then I can adhere my green panel down to that card mat. And that is just like the red star paper was a larger scrap piece that I had, so it was perfect size for a card mat. Add that strip on top, and then they were just a hair longer than the card mat piece, so I trimmed those down, and we'll add that to my card base. And since this is a horizontal card, I thought it would be a great chance to use the Steamboat. There were 2 Steamboat ephemera pieces in the ephemera pack, and so I thought that I would go ahead and take advantage of a landscape card to use those, and then added one of the scraps of that plaid paper as a fishtail banner to the top right of the card. Going to do the Let's Celebrate sentiment again, but this time I'm going to stamp it directly onto the green. It stamps really well, but I did want to test it just to make sure. So I did that on a scrap piece of paper, but then stamped it directly onto that green plaid panel. We'll add my Steamboat down. Add that last plaid strip to the inside of the card. And then that is our third card. Card 4 moves on to sketch set 19. So for this one, I'm going to be making 2 cards, and the panel is supposed to be 2.5 by 4.5 inches, like the long strip, and then the square piece is 3 by 3. I do that kind of tan check piece is the correct measurements according to my sketch set, but then the other piece that I'm using is a little bit thinner, but it still works. I just wanted to go ahead and use both of those, like the postage stamp pattern. Since I was going to have 2 3-inch square pieces, I thought I would go ahead and try to make 2 cards. Bringing in black cardstock for the card mat again, adding fishtails to the top and bottom of both of these longer strips. And then I did decide to go ahead and bring in some white cardstock to mat those square pieces just to help them pop a little bit more. So the matting layer for these for those squares are just 3 1/4 inch square. Cleaning up those fishtails, and then can go ahead and start assembling the cards. And most of the time my card mats are 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 just to leave a small white border around the mat. We'll add those to the card bases, and then add those fishtail strips down using some Barely Art glue. And then we'll add the square pieces to their matting layers. And then we'll add both those layers to the card base. Question: were you familiar with Steamboat Willie before you saw this kit? Having 2 daughters who are teens now, but who watched a lot of Disney shows growing up, Steamboat Willie kind of showed up as like a little movie intro for a lot of the Disney movies, and it's like vintage Disney. So it was fun to see Lizi bring this into kit form. It's just a really fun kit. A lot of great pieces are included. So I decided to use these 2 square postage stamp framed Mickeys. I debated about backing them on white cardstock so that they would pop more, but I didn't want to cover the postage stamp pattern behind them. So I went ahead and left them open, and then I just have 2 like my sentiments here, both the same, just say happy birthday. It was like a thinner sentiment. So I just added those on to the bottom, and then again going to find some scrap strips that I can add to the inside of the card. Both of these strips were like 4 inches, so they worked out perfectly. And then these 2 cards are done. So I'm going to move down to sketch 19B, and this one calls for 3 strips that are 1 1/2 by 3 inches. So I had these 3 scraps that were 1 1/2 inches wide and right about 3 inches. So it kind of worked out perfectly. I didn't have to trim them down. Now, once I put them on the paper, I realized that they were all like off from 3 inches just a hair. So they were all like slightly different lengths. But like I really noticed it once I put them onto this cardstock, this white cardstock matting layer. But then once I'm done with the card, once I add the embellishments, you don't really notice it. So I did try to embellish heavily on this one, going with that black card mat again, and wanted to play with some of these non-Willie ephemera pieces. I've been wanting to use the crate of birds for a while, and so I decided to put the parrot behind them just to kind of add a little more to the scene. Contemplated the sun, decided against it, and we'll go ahead and get the card assembled. I don't really know the measurements I didn't really measure that white matte layer. I just went so that it was just wide enough and, long enough to leave a small border around those strips. Gluing the parrot down first so that he can kind of be on the perch behind the crate of birds. It's like he's watching over them, making sure they don't escape from the steamboat. And then I had stamped that Let's Celebrate sentiment as a test, so I will go ahead and use that on this card. And I do end up, when I'm done, like off camera, I do end up going ahead and stamping Happy Birthday on the inside of all of these cards that I've added the Let's Celebrate sentiment to the front, just so that it completes it and lets everyone know they are birthday cards. And then I'm going to add this little strip. It's anchors to the inside. And then decide to bring in some more of those black diamond peel-offs just to accent this. So I'm not necessarily trying to use up this kit. I kind of want to hoard it, but I did want to use up some of those little scraps so that I just don't have I don't want to get to the end and just have scraps left. I want to have some full sheets too to be able to play with in the future. I had some strips that were roughly the same size, like same width. So I decided to go ahead and trim them down to 5 3/8 inches long. And I'm just going to make a card panel here with these. And then I have this thinner strip from the tan check that I'm going to cut down to 5 3/8 as well. Like they were just kind of like random sizes. So I didn't necessarily trim the width, I just trimmed the length so that they were all 5 3/8 inches wide. And I like that the blue, I put the blue at the bottom to kind of mimic the sea, because since this is another horizontal card, I am going to take advantage and use the other Steamboat ephemera piece. So I don't necessarily center this check strip, I kind of put it towards the bottom just a little bit and then use that as a shelf for the steamboat, and then decide to bring in the ship wheel or the boat wheel as an extra piece to kind of layer behind it. Glue this down. And for my sentiment, you guessed it, we're going back to the Let's Celebrate sentiment. And I could have stamped it directly onto that blue probably, but I decided to go ahead and add it to the white just so it pops a little bit more on this one. Add a fishtail, cut to the end. And I'm going to butt it right up to that right hand side of the pattern paper panels. And then there were some little stars left in the ephemera, and so I decided to go ahead and bring those in for some added detail. And then of course we are going to add a strip to the inside of the card using that red pattern again, just trimming it down so it's about 5 1/4 inches wide. And our card is complete. So for our final card, I am jumping to my sketch set number 1. And I'm going to use up some of the scraps of the pattern paper, and then I also had this wood grain pattern. It's like a shelf liner type of, it's adhesive backed, so it just reminds me of shelf liner. So I decided to go ahead and use it as well. I brought in another black cardstock mat, and then the shelf liner or the wood grain pattern is about 2 inches wide. So I go 2 1/4 by 5 for the white matting layer. And then I just have that tan check scrap, and then I'm going to use the parrot and the sun on this one. Add this all to the card base. This is kind of one of my go-to sketch sets for scraps because you can pull in any type of card mat, and then I always have like 2-inch strips left from using pattern paper as a card mat. So, and then I can always find a smaller scrap for that third kind of horizontal piece that I'm using the check pattern for. I do add some scrap cardstock to the back of the right side of that check pattern since it's overlapping and hanging off the edge of the wood grain, and then add glue to the ephemera pieces. And then I'm going to add my sentiment kind of at the bottom of the parrot stand, just so it kind of it takes away the floating effect of the stand. It gives it a base, I guess. But again, with the Let's Celebrate sentiment. And then this time I wanted to bring in some more yellow on that black, so I brought in some of these yellow stars from the Variety Peel Off pack from the Steamboat Willie add-ons. And I'm using like a larger and then 2 mediums. And then I just have the scrap that I'm going to be using on the inside. And this will be our 8th and final card that is complete. I did have some scraps left, but not a lot, so I'm fine putting this back in with the paper packs and saving them. Here are the 8 cards that I managed to make from scraps today. Hope you guys enjoyed and got some inspiration. Please check the description box below for the links to everything. And as always, I thank you so very much for your time and hope that you all have a very crafty day.